everybody, welcome to What the Flick. I'm Matt, this is John. We're here to talk about the second episode of Season 6 of Game of Thrones called Home. Boy, a lot of stuff went down. As you probably guessed, we're going to spoil a lot because holy shit, guess who's back?
Davos.
Back again.
Davos is back.
Tell a friend.
Yeah, surprising everyone because nobody predicted it. Nobody saw it coming.
Right.
Jon Snow did return, although just at the end.
All right, but that's at the very end of the show. Let's talk about early on in the show. So the show opens up with somebody else that we haven't seen in a long, long time. Bran, right?
Yeah.
Bran.
So we do.
Who looks a lot older because he's grown up.
There's a bit of the Harry Potter going on where between seasons they grow 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
By the 7th movie, Ron Weasley was 7 feet tall. Actually, it's pretty horrifying. He didn't fit, but. Yeah, he's looking like his training is going along well.
Yeah, so we get this interesting scene where he's, initially I thought, God, did they recast young Bran? We see these two kids training, and I'm thinking, well, that kid's too big now. Maybe they recast. No, he's actually having visions of his father and Benjen Stark training. And
Benjen finally appearing again.
Yeah, finally appearing. And then Lyanna comes in, and we see also a very young Hodor, who we learn his name is Willis.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's a little bit different, because in the book, Old Nan kind of mentioned that his name was Walder.
Yes.
Early in the book, right?
His name was Walder, and we also knew already in the books how he lost his ability to speak, which is not spoiling territory. It's not a grand mystery or anything like that. But it was cool to see him when he was still like, you can see Hodor in him, the way he moves and everything, but he wanted to fight.
Right.
Yeah, I liked that.
He actually had words.
He had words, yeah.
And then Bran comes out of the vision, he's talking to him, and what kind of reaction do we get? What do we think we're going to get? Hodor.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, to see it taken away from him again. And also, you look at Hodor and you think, there might be something inside of him where he remembers, like where he knows that he was something different at one point. But from the vision, what I noticed is I love that Lyanna, who I guess I hadn't known or remembered was apparently the oldest, also a bit of a dick, because she goes in and fucks with her brothers and everything. But I wonder why they would remind us about Lyanna Stark. Why would she all of a sudden be featured prominently in a scene?
I don't know.
Maybe we'll find out in a future flashback.
Yeah, I mean, look, like when we talk about that stuff, there's a thing called the law of the economy of characters, where you don't bring in a character unless something's going to be interesting with them. And kind of on that note, it's interesting to see Max von Sydow as kind of that human aspect of the Three-Eyed Raven, a character that we don't have the full name of yet. And you cast a guy like Sydow in that part because, I mean, Force Awakens notwithstanding, you expect to get more out of him. And Max von Sydow is such a great actor.
I forgot that was him. Yeah.
Yeah, such a great actor. But it's cool to see. One of the things I liked about that flashback scene is he's standing on that catwalk with Bran, and they're watching, and then he turns back to Bran at one point, and Bran's gone down into the action, and there's that look from Sydow like, oh, wait a minute, what's he doing?
Yeah.
Right? And they come out of the vision, like he takes the vision away, and Bran's upset. He's like, oh, I was home, I was enjoying myself. And he's like, yeah, the world under the sea is beautiful, but if you stay too long, you'll drown.
Which reminds me a bit of, there's a character from the books who doesn't appear in the show, so I don't think it matters, but it's a like a jester character.
Right.
Who has lost his mind by having drowned for a little while.
Patchface, right?
Patchface, yeah. And he says things that are very similar to what the Three-Eyed Raven says there. So as I always go and I read the reviews, like I read the AV Club review and the IGN review and sometimes Forbes as well. And I had missed that him looking down there at the beginning of the episode or a little bit into the episode brings us back to the beginning of the show, which starts with Jon and Bran practicing in the courtyard and everything. So it was a nice way to return home in that way. I did notice, I get Max von Sydow seems like a great actor. I don't have the familiarity with his movie past and everything that you do, obviously. But it does seem a bit odd that when they first introduced the Three-Eyed Raven, he was like a fairly desiccated man in this throne.
Right.
But even then, he was not nearly as corrupted by age and nature as he is in the books, where he's half tree, basically.
Right.
But now, with the shot that I posted on Instagram of that quote that you just read, it's basically like Max von Sydow lounging on a wicker chair at this point.
Yeah, practically.
It doesn't even matter that he's part of it.
Well, part of the thing
so virile.
Well, part of the thing about Max von Sydow is that he's a legend. I mean, worked with Bergman. Like he's one of those guys that he can say, yeah, you're not going to put me in the chair. You're not going to cover me in trees. Mm-hmm. All right, you're Max von Sydow.
Yeah,
fine.
Yeah.
All right, fine. We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like the other thing we get in that scene is that hint from that child of the forest. Is it Leaf?
Oh, I didn't even catch a name.
If I remember correctly, that character's name is Leaf in the books.
I've forgotten. And also, I think it's a different child than was in the previous seasons.
Anyway, so she's talking, she's watching what happens, and then she goes out and tells Meryn, hey, you need to come back inside because Bran's going to need you.
Yeah.
Who's still obviously grieving over the loss of her brother, and
feels so separated from everything. And they show that the physical distance is amazing.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. But we get that little bit of an opening, and then we cut to Castle Black.
Yeah. Wait, really fast on that. We do get one extra hint, though. She says that he's going to need your help when you go back out into the world.
He's not
which is
stay
like,
here forever.
Good. We're going to go back out in the world. That's awesome. Because previously, for all we know, he's going to be in a tree for 600 years.
He'll be the next tree. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's good to know.
Yeah, so he'll be, unless he's a walking tree.
An Ent, perhaps.
Exactly.
If he heads for the Entmoot.
Right. We are going to get a moot, but not an Entmoot.
Exactly.
Right? We'll talk
Hopefully
about
it'll
moots,
go faster.
Right. Talk about moots in a bit. Castle Black, we see Alistair Thorne. Like, hey, everybody, come out. You got to join your brothers. And you see all those guys outside with, like, their crossbows pointed at the door.
I don't trust Alistair Thorne.
Yeah,
I don't
Alistair
think
Thorne
so.
is kind of a dick. I liked, one of the things I really liked about the way that scene was staged was that they're banging on the door and they're about to break down that door. And then you hear these other banging at the Castle Black gate.
Yeah.
And there's more banging, and it's this nice kind of callback to what they were just doing. And then the door bursts, the gate bursts open, and there's the giant, and all of the wildlings come in because, yay, Ed's back.
Ed's back. And like we predicted, they interrupted it just in time, the nick of time.
Just in time.
It's interesting, even though obviously we wanted Ed to get the wildlings and have them come back, after watching the show for so many years and reading it and all that, seeing wildlings break down the gates of Castle Black, still an uncomfortable thing to watch.
Yeah.
Because for all we know, they'd been, like, this is Game of Thrones. They could have just cut off Ed's head and then they have Castle Black. Like, they may have just used it to get in, even though I guess they didn't really need his help to get in.
Well, and
they had a giant.
And that's the thing. Jon offered them he offered them refuge, right? So, the wildlings still, they haven't necessarily bent the knee, but and say what you will, they owe him, right? And they know that, right? They absolutely know that, and so they're there to make things right, and we'll see how that all goes. I like that the giant gets shot by the one guy with the crossbow, and he just looked more ticked off than anything else. He's like, and then grabs that guy and like
crushes him.
Oh my God!
Don't shoot the giant. Right. Definitely. That scene had shades of. There's a very popular GIF that came out of the first Avengers movie of the Hulk taking Loki and just smashing him left and right. There was a lot of that.
Well, and one of the things that was interesting is it makes you realize, especially, it reinforces a couple of things. Most notably, why Jon needs to bring the wildlings in on their side, because Castle Black is so, like, the Night's Watch is spread so thin, right? Like, these guys come in and they make short work of the Night's Watch.
They kill one.
They kill one guy.
Which is like 1/40th of the Night's Watch at this point.
Right. They take Thorne and his cronies and that kid and they just throw him in the dungeon, right? And that's kind of it. But that's like all the resistance that there is, because again, like, all these guys see that giant and they're like, all right, we're not going to do, or okay, you win. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, if the Night's Watch still had 200 or 300 members, then maybe they could take the giant, but...
Right.
Yeah, and that's not just a giant, that's like the badass giant.
Right.
I obviously in an episode or two we're gonna see Alistair Thorne. They're gonna go and talk to him and all that.
Right.
But we do know from the past, don't lock up people, kill people, because if you lock them up, they kill you in a future season. That tends to be what happens.
Yes, we do see that, but it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens with Thorne.
Yeah.
I mean, what's he gonna do? Stab Jon?
Again, what is dead may never die.
Right.
So I have a criticism too of the way this scene played out, but I'm going to save it for when we wrap around to the rest of the Jon Snow.
So then we cut to King's Landing, right? And we start off with that guy telling that joke about Cersei, right?
Which was funny.
Which was like,
he was half an inch short of an inch.
Right.
That's good for medieval times.
Right. We see him talking about that, and then you see him wander off, and he's taking a leak, and like the minute you watch a show like this, like, oh, that guy's by himself, he's dead.
Yeah, definitely.
He's dead.
And dead, it's interesting. So there's 2 giants in the episode, and they kill their people roughly the same way, just smash their head against the wall.
Right.
Yeah.
What are they now? Have they given him a name? Weren't they calling him Robert Strong?
Yes, Robert Strong, yes. Which I don't...
Unrelated to Mark Strong, the excellent British actor.
Yes, and Robert Baratheon. But I do like that they gave him the same name. Actually, that's interesting that they gave him the same name. I wonder if that... Well, anyway, we'll wrap around to that too. It of course begs the question, that scene. I mean, the scene is funny, and it reminds you of how Robert Strong is this physical imposing force.
Right, because it's the mountain.
Because it's the mountain, presumably. And then it seems
how many
odd.
guys that big are walking around? Come on.
I don't know, other than half giants. I mean, the mountain, I think, is bigger than Hodor. As big as Hodor.
Well, we know it's not Hodor.
We know it's not Hodor. But he doesn't talk. Yeah, so it
which
makes
is how we know it's not Hodor.
Exactly, yeah. So is he just wandering around looking for people bad-mouthing Cersei? Which seems bizarre, but then you think, oh, it's Cersei. She might well tell him to wander around looking for people bad-mouthing her. That's something she would totally do as entertainment.
Yeah, you would think so. That makes sense. That makes sense. And then we see that she's kind of locked up. I love the scene where she wants to get out of the Red Keep, and there's those guards that are telling her no, right? And then becomes this standoff for a minute where Robert Strong's hand goes to his sword, and all of those guards put their hands on their swords, and there's this moment like, oh no.
This could be bad.
Right? And then Cersei kind of backs down a little bit. And it's not until they turn around and leave that you see, understandably, all these guys like, oh, thank God.
And I don't know if they could take him. I mean, it's a lot of guys.
It's a lot of guys.
He's a giant, but
right.
Can you harm him? Can he be killed? I don't know. We see in his body language, the way that his hand goes to his sword, he looks to her for direction.
Right.
And that tells you a lot about what he is. He's not a totally unthinking zombie, presumably. Like there is some intelligence and like thinking going on. Like he's trying to read from what she does whether he should attack or not. I don't know that that'll matter, but there's something to him. And also, she willingly backs off. Like the Cersei that we've known in the past would have just sent, kill these men.
Right.
But she chooses not to. So maybe her experience with the Walk of Shame has actually changed her.
Maybe, or she knows that, this guy maybe can't take all those guys, right?
She's not sure, yeah.
She's not sure.
Maybe she's keeping her powder dry.
She might be. So then we see, it was interesting that she was sewing her dress. Like that's something that the old Cersei wouldn't have done either. Like
she's changed.
She's changed. Yeah, this scene, the events in King's Landing set up some interesting stuff because we get to see Tommen and Jaime at Myrcella's funeral.
Yes.
Right? And Tommen is talking about, that was an interesting scene because Tommen is talking about, early on he says, oh, he told me to do X. And you're like, oh, he's talking about the High Sparrow. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he's telling Jaime, oh, well, he told me to keep my mother locked up. And he told me she couldn't come, and then he starts lamenting about how he wasn't strong enough for them. And I think that we see the hints. We talked about this, about the idea of Jaime and Cersei deciding that, okay, we're gonna take on everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that what we see in this scene is Tommen is going to be their pawn in that, because Tommen, is counseled by Jaime, go and beg your mother's forgiveness, and he says, I should have been strong enough to protect my mother. I should have been strong. I should have taken the Kingsguard in and gone and fought all of the Sparrows.
Yeah.
Right? And he's lamenting that. He regrets it. And I think that we may see him trying to be stronger at Jaime and Cersei's behest.
Yeah.
I think that's going to go really badly for everybody in the kingdom because they're going to say things like, yeah, attack Dorne. And he'll be like, yeah, that's right, Mom.
He wants to show he's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first he gets advice from Jaime. A little bit later on, he gets advice from his mom. And he wants to... he wishes that he'd done more earlier. What I would have liked is there should be a scene or two where they show, assuming that similar to the books, that the sparrows are increasing in number over time. Like this is not like a static situation.
Right.
Like the longer you wait, the more of them there are.
Right.
And the high sparrow sort of implies, we can topple a nation. Obviously, he thinks that he has a lot of numbers. It's very ballsy of Jaime to go into that situation. That they would, after what happened with the church, that they would even have the funeral for Myrcella there. Like that's incredibly risky, like going into there and bringing the king, God knows what the High Sparrow might do at that point.
Well, but I think Jaime's still, as much as he's lost his hand, I think that there's at least being in King's Landing and the discussion that he's had with Cersei, like there's still a little bit of that old arrogant Jaime there, right? Like, and when the Septon comes in and he starts talking to him, and another great performance by Jonathan Pryce, you see this great scene where Jaime, not even backhandedly, like basically kind of threatens the Septon. And the Septon's like, okay, sure. Like, then why not? Right? And like kind of calls his bluff. And then you see all of the other sparrows come in.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the sense of like, oh, they're, I think within the confines of the budget of the show and where you have to spend your production budget, I think they did a good job of when he says, look, like these are all people who have nothing. Like we have nothing, but together we can overthrow an empire.
Yeah.
And that's going to come to an interesting head. We hadn't even discussed that last week. Like, are the Lannisters going to tilt towards war with Dorne, but yet they've got all of these sparrows that they have to deal with as well. Like, and there's been hints in the production that there's going to be some giant battle scenes coming.
Perhaps in the Sept, in Baelor's Sept.
Right, or just in this season in general. So it could be something, we know from the books, the risk of being spoilery, we know that there's some big battle scenes that are teased in Winds of Winter that are going to happen, that may happen, right? There's been some chapters that have talked about big battle scenes that are happening across the sea.
Yeah.
But maybe we don't see those this season. Maybe we see something that's closer to home. Maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I liked everything about that scene, both because, Jaime makes clear that the sort of weird hypocrisy and misogyny of the church, that they care more about the homophobic crimes and women lying than, he deserves to be killed 10 times over for the things that he's done.
Right.
But they don't, even after admitting that, like he's got all of his sparrows, they don't arrest him. They let him go.
Right.
But also they don't make, as with most of their villains, other than possibly Ramsay, they don't make the High Sparrow an impossible to understand villain. Like he talks about his fears. He calls his bluff, but I think he was willing to die. Like I think
he absolutely was.
Believes it. Like and Jaime is growing and changing too. Like I think Jaime of season 1 or 2 kills the High Sparrow and fights those guys and probably dies.
But Jaime can still be outmaneuvered, right? Like Jaime can still be outmaneuvered in this situation like that because the Septon's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And even with all those guys, Jaime says to him, they can't stop you. They can't stop me from striking you down. And the Septon says, yeah, I know. Yeah. And you could probably take a bunch of them out too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jaime wisely doesn't attack. Jaime, great fighter, not the smartest guy necessarily. And also, whoever does their props or weapons, costumes, I like that they had the sparrows. They had maces, and they also had this weird weapon that was like a plank with 4 spikes coming out of one side. Just a brutal look. Like it looks like what you'd use on a steak.
Right. Right. It's like nails in a baseball bat.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Very, very common, very brutal. They don't have swords or anything like that.
It's do it yourself. It's like either what we found or I just made myself because they don't have the money to buy weapons.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of other shows would simply have thrown some of their old swords at those people to use. And so I like that little touch.
Right. All right. So we go to Marine. Interesting.
Well, one other thing with once we leave there, we have Cersei and Tommen.
Oh, right.
And what I found interesting about that was Cersei's reluctance to even look at Tommen after her emotional breakdown in the previous episode about losing her kids.
Right.
This is like her sweetest child, perhaps, and she can't even look at him when he comes for forgiveness. She hugs him and all that, but you can see that she's like preparing herself for his death.
Yeah, or at least she's afraid of it, right? Like she's acknowledged in that final episode that the witch was right, and she has to be on her mind.
Yeah.
Right. So you wonder. And again, like we're blazing new territory. We're not on what the books give us any guidance on. Is she? So we don't know what she's thinking. Where there's a lot of chapters in the books that we know what Cersei's thinking, and we don't know anymore. So is she making plans, knowing that Tommen's going to die?
Yeah.
And maneuvers to use that as some kind of sacrifice in whatever plans. Then again. She's never, that's one of the things, we talked about this a lot last season. Cersei's never as good at the politics game as she thinks she is.
She thinks she is, yeah.
She's never as good, right? She thinks she's great at it, and she's actually terrible at it.
She might be better now, though, because she was always, like, she's smart, but she allowed her emotions to take over, cause her to make bad decisions. She seems more aware of that now.
For now.
That she's a mean person, a jealous person, a vindictive person. That might make her better at the politics.
We'll see.
And one other thing I was thinking during that scene was, there's been opportunities in the books and in the show so far for Cersei to die, certainly. Like when she was in that cell, she could have gone to trial or something like that. But I've never really thought that she was seriously in risk of dying. But now that we're off into new territory, God knows what might happen. What I would like is, if she's going to die, I think that it would be great if it was in defense of Tommen, like to save Tommen's life. Because she has always been about her family, about protecting her kids. She can't be redeemed for the things that she's done. But if she was willing to die in defense of Tommen, I think that that would be a sweet close to who she was as a character.
Maybe.
It might never happen. She might survive the whole time. I don't know.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. It'll be interesting because I could see a world in which she also, you know, is willing to do that, but still sees Tommen die anyway. Right? Like that's that's the knife twisting that George R. R. Martin does.
Maybe.
Well, maybe, right? But not until after seeing Tommen die.
That would be brutal.
Yeah.
But possible.
Right? Like now she knows in no uncertain terms that that's likely because she's seen it happen with 2 other kids. And so, you know, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
It'll be, I don't know. Like you're almost, it's weird. We're talking about like, I'm almost worried for Cersei.
Yeah. Oh, because she's been through so much. She had the walk of shame. Like if anything is going to make you empathize with a person, it's something like that. Or Theon's torture, for instance, as bad of a person as he was.
Right.
And we're getting to the point in the show and in the books where we're starting to wonder who is going to make it to the finish line. We're losing characters. We lost like 3 major characters.
We saw
this
someone
episode.
almost didn't make it this particular episode. Like I thought this could be the episode where we lose Tyrion.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, we want to turn to that?
Yeah, so let's talk about Marine. So there's this, you know, this conference with Tyrion and Varys and Missandei and Grey Worm, and Tyrion makes this joke like, hey, you know, because he's drinking and they point something out and he's like, listen, if I lost my cock, I'd be drinking all the time. Right? Which was fun, you know, like you get a little hints of the Tyrion and Varys show again, which is always kind of fun to watch.
and Varys is, I don't make dwarf jokes, but you think them.
But you think them, which Varys is like, all right, you got me. And they're talking about how, as we had heard, Astapor and Yunkai have gone back to slaving.
Yeah.
Right? And then Tyrion's like, well, look, like we're sitting on these weapons that nobody's used yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Significant, big weapons now.
And one of the best lines of the whole episode is, that's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Yeah. That's a great, if he ever gets like a trading card, that will be the quote at the bottom of it.
That would be House Tyrion.
Exactly. And during that scene, when he's talking about his knowledge of dragons, which they've foreshadowed before, and it's using him in the right way. Like some random character knowing that would be sort of a cop-out, but him knowing that, he talked in the 2nd episode with Jon Snow when they're off on the way to the wall that like reading these books keeps the mind sharp. Like that's why you need to know these things.
Right.
I was very afraid that when he was talking to Missandei about how you've been around the dragons, I thought he was going to send her. And I was very worried that would be the death of Missandei.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing. I thought he was going to bring her down and have her introduce him.
Like social proof, kind of?
Like,
hey, I'm
your
cool.
friends, introduce me to your friends.
Yeah.
And no, he doesn't. He just goes down there, that was a really interesting scene. I was worried it was going to be like that scene that you get at the very end of the last book that we've got so far, right?
We shouldn't say too much, but yeah, there's a scene very similar to it,
scene.
Which ends differently.
Much differently, right? But
brutal.
Tyrion goes down, and like that speech about him wanting the dragon, like that bit, that's a great scene. And, you know, he does appear to make some kind of, maybe some kind of connection. It's hard to tell. The dragons are hard to read.
Yeah.
Right? Like they are clearly intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it turned its head and neck towards him. I don't know that he predicted that they could be more intelligent than humans, but it's not a horse. Like they know what's going on. They not only know that they're chained, they know what portion of the chain needs to be disconnected for them to be free.
And you get the sense that they're listening to him, right? Like you get the sense that they're listening to him. He unchains the second one, and then they're like, all right, peace out. All right, thanks, we're out. Good, bye.
Yeah. He was very happy to be able to get out.
Right.
And yeah, I think to that point, when he first goes down there, it begins the fire in its throat.
Right.
And that's when I feared a little bit that he would die. I do think as much as Game of Thrones can kill anyone, I still feel like Tyrion has a special protection that no other character except perhaps Daenerys has.
Right.
Like, I wasn't very afraid he would die, but it was not impossible.
Well, and the thing that I think was interesting, I don't know if you caught this, I felt like what you see Dinklage do in his performance is that Tyrion bows his head. Like,
yes.
he puts his head down and looks through his eyes, like kind of looks through his eyebrows and kind of bows his head to those dragons.
Yeah.
And then they're like, all right, we'll give you a minute. And that was interesting because that puts them far ahead of horses or dogs. Like,
yeah.
That's a being that like understands a gesture of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a big development, right? Like that tells us, oh, okay, these dragons are sharper than I think that we've really considered before.
Yeah, it was actually, again, very similar to something in Harry Potter where the hippogriff or whatever, you have to bow and show it respect. But the dragon's probably smarter than the hippogriff. And we also see every time they take time off the dragons, you can expect the dragons will have grown, even though they're chained and even though they're underneath. I mean, those things are every bit as big as Drogon was when he attacked the Colosseum. Right. Those things are serious weapons. And we don't know when they walk to the back of that room, is there a way for them to get out? Presumably, that door is not the only way in. He still has to get them out of the room, but now you have 3 dragons potentially looking for Daenerys.
Right.
You have dragons that now the idea of Tyrion getting on one, that seems much more plausible now.
Right.
They accept him. He touched one.
Right.
That's going to be an exciting scene.
Right. If by accept you mean didn't eat him.
They did not eat him. That's all the acceptance I would need from a dragon.
But maybe he can get them fed now, right? Like
and
that
keep
might
them
be
growing.
and keep them growing. Although I did like the capper to that scene is when he says to Varys, like, next time I have an idea like that, punch me in the face.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. No, it worked. I mean, yeah. And that was another... It's always interesting when I read reviews and other people's comments on like what people think about the episodes. I loved the first episode. Most people thought that it was slow, that not much happened, I guess. And I didn't really grasp until I looked back on this episode how much each, other than maybe Tommen, each of the storylines advances. Like you have a new, you turn a page. I mean, you walk through a door. Like we're gonna get to Theon in a second, but the dragons are now free. Like that's big.
And these are they're not huge scenes, right? Like we're getting some compact scenes, but they move things forward, like Braavos, right? Like we see Arya and Braavos.
Thank God.
We see her getting her daredevil training, right? Like
and she's better.
And she's getting a little bit better, right? And then Jaqen H'ghar shows up, or somebody with that face shows up and starts asking her questions, and takes her off. And it's like, all right, now she's going to get trained for real.
Yeah.
And that's maybe like 2 minutes of the show, right?
It was fast.
It's a short bit, but it's a key bit, right? And like the end of that scene is, what did she say? You don't need a girl is not a beggar anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
I was really worried that they were going to have her there the whole season or half the season. I'm glad that they abandoned the train. We only need to see a little snippet of it. I don't know where it's going from here, but get her out there somehow, like training on the road, on the job. Let's get some buddy cop stuff. Like get her. She hasn't seen another major character in way too long at this point.
Right. And that'll be, that was a nice little scene. And then we see a lot of stuff happen in Winterfell.
Yes, big again, stepping forward on that.
Right, Roose and Ramsay and
I warned him last review.
The new Lord Karstark talking about how they haven't found Sansa yet.
Yeah.
They found the bodies of the guards.
Tinier Lord Karstark.
Right, the tinier Lord Karstark. And Ramsay says something that sounds really bloodthirsty, and Roose kind of corrects him and says, look, like you get the reputation of being a mad dog.
You'd be treated like one.
You're going to be treated like a mad dog.
Except he's not, like, if you know he's a mad dog, let him hug you, you fool. But yeah, so he had the idea that they should do what the wildlings did, send a force to kill Jon Snow. He doesn't know that Jon Snow was dead at that point in the episode. And then he reveals that this is something that we could do, even if the North rises against us, as long as the Karstarks, the Umbers, and the Manderleys, which I don't think we've seen in the show yet, even though it's a relatively big part of the books. And like that's his plan.
Right. For once, Ramsay actually has a plan that's not, or it seems,
a messed up plan.
I mean, it's vicious and nasty, but it's not insane.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like, oh, I'll just go up there and I'll kill Jon Snow. He's like, no. Our lords, our liege lords, our bannermen have more army combined than anyone else, right? Like
in the north, yeah.
in the north, right?
All the rest combined,
right?
I think,
We got this, Dad. We're cool.
Yeah, and I should have picked up on it that he's saying that plan about the Karstarks with the Karstark there. Karstark doesn't say anything. This is something that they had already talked about.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that till you just brought that up. That's a good point. So,
because of course, once the thing that happens, you're wondering how the Karstark is going to respond.
Right. So then the Maester comes in and says, Walda's given birth to a boy, right? And
you see a look cross over Ramsay's face. And he hugs him. And then
gives him a little something.
Roose says, you'll always be my firstborn, which is exactly what you should say to avoid being stabbed. Unfortunately, he still gets stabbed.
Right.
And what
he doesn't say is, but if something happens to you, I got another kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Right.
But I mean, Ramsay, the new cuddlier Ramsay, who is sad that his girlfriend died, says, I love that you said that. And then you have the stabbing, and the way they shot it, and I think it's intentional, you don't know who stabbed who.
Yeah, there's a moment of that.
They both look like they've been stabbed.
Right.
And it's the exact same way that he stabbed Robb Stark. Roose Bolton did.
Right.
Close up, right in that spot. They're like hugging each other, basically. How stupid was he to allow Ramsay to run wild with another boy on the way? You can't, that's too stupid.
Yeah, it's, look, like we've talked about this last season, right? Everybody's got a blind spot.
Yeah.
Or last episode, we talked about everybody's got a blind spot. And Roose's blind spot was Ramsay. And even though he acted like he kind of had Ramsay's number, not to that extent, right? Not to that extent. And so then there's that great moment where Ramsay says to the Maester, like, oh, he was poisoned by our enemies, right? The Maester comes in and he's like, all right. And Karstark's like, speak to your lord with respect. And just like, oh, okay. Karstark knows where his bread is buttered.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Which leads me to believe that they had already knew that that Ramsay was going to do that.
That scene with Walda is brutal.
It's pretty brutal. And as soon as they're together, how is he going to do it?
Right.
And then
when
as soon
he
as
says,
he
may I
opens...
hold him? You're like, don't give that kid your...
No. I thought he was going to throw him in a fire or something.
Yeah.
I was really worried about that.
Right. And it's messed up that we think that the show will do that.
That he could just throw a baby in a fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was afraid he was just going to go like break the kid's neck. Like it was going to be something terrible that we'd see. I mean, not that what happened isn't terrible. And they draw it out.
They do draw it out.
This was a show where we saw, as much as like we were doing some quick cuts with scenes, there were some parts that really, like even the stuff with Tyrion with the dragons, like this show was not afraid to take this particular episode, drag moments out to drag out the tension.
Including the last scene.
Including the last scene, which we'll get to in a minute. But with Tyrion talking to the dragons was a nice, slow, tense scene. This with Walda in the dog pen was very tense and took its time.
Walda realizes what's going to happen. I mean, I'm glad that they didn't actually show it. Some people were still mad that they did it, that they apparently they sort of drew it out as long as they did, but. That's Ramsay, and I mean, this isn't just a random kill. It's not like he plucked a peasant and let it in. This is about protecting his position as the head of the household. This is a political move.
But he's also going to take his time and enjoy it.
Yeah, he's going to enjoy it. He's still the same person.
Right.
But it's easy to gloss over, but Roose has been a character for a really long time. I mean, that's a major character. He's been in so many episodes. To kill him, to kill his new Lord brother or whatever, and his mom. That's a big thing. It doesn't stand out as much because we've already had the Red Wedding, but that's significant.
Right, and so now Ramsay's what, the Warden of the North?
I guess.
Right?
But I don't even know under whose authority. Like, Roose technically rebelled against King's Landing.
Right, but that was all part of the plot, right? Because then he helped kill Robb Stark because he switched. That was the deal he cut with
I thought that there was some...
Tywin. That was the deal he cut with Tywin.
That's true, but I thought that since then he did something against the crown, but now I don't
think he's still working for the crown, if I remember correctly.
But remember, he was going to have that plan with Littlefinger. I don't even remember exactly what that plan was going to be.
He was playing everybody against each other, right?
So I don't even know, does Ramsay have the authority to lead? I mean, he has the numbers. He has the effective authority. Right. And Tommen is a little bit too busy to do anything about it.
Well, that goes back to the riddle that Varys asked. I think it was Varys who asks, like, about, between the Septon and the king and the
warrior
merchant,
or whatever.
right?
Oh, the merchant, yeah.
Right, who can get the sellsword to kill the other two, right? Like, where does the power, like, that's the riddle that we get early on in the book. Power lies wherever men think it lies.
Yeah.
Right? And Ramsay could capitalize on that.
Yeah. And I don't know at this point, are there enough wildlings theoretically to beat the combined like vassals of...
Probably not.
I don't know, yeah.
Probably not.
I mean, maybe, I guess they have giants. That's something.
We'll see.
And it's easy to say that you've got the Manderleys, but maybe we'll actually see that place for the first time.
Yeah. And then we go outside Winterfell to see, get that quick scene with Bran.
Yeah, little scene.
Right, little scene where Bran's telling Sansa where she last saw Arya, right?
Yeah, we get so few of those connections.
Yeah.
That they know each other are alive.
Well, it was interesting because one of the things that happens in that scene is Brienne says, yeah, she was with a man. Like,
she doesn't say who.
Right, she doesn't know who the Hound is. Right, because that's when she
Does she not know who the Hound is? She
fought the Hound.
I mean, she was a knight. She should be aware of who the king's son's dog was.
I mean, it's not like she's looking people up on the internet.
I guess that's true. I just assume with the burn face. Yeah, maybe she doesn't know, I guess.
Well, that's the thing is she fights the Hound, right? And Arya takes off.
Yeah.
Right? But she clearly didn't know who that was. She was just after Arya.
I guess that's true. I feel like she should. I feel like the knights should know of each other. But I guess it makes sense that she doesn't.
Or she did know and she didn't think it was important.
Well, that's yeah, and that's interesting. She might not know the connection that Sansa has with the Hound.
Right. That's one of the things that we have to remember as viewers is that we know more than most of the characters.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I mean, it's the thing where Ramsay's talking about going and killing Jon Snow. Like, buddy, get with the program.
Exactly. And I wonder, would Sansa have been? Would she feel better for Arya or worse if she knew that the Hound was with? And we got to remember that the Hound offered to take Sansa out of King's Landing to the Wall, I believe, ends up sort of doing something like that with Arya along the way.
Right.
And then...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so we know that they're going to go to the Wall, which we sort of figured they had to do at this point. God knows what's going to be waiting for them there. But they're going to go. That Theon chooses not to stay with them is the big development, I think, for that group.
Yeah, and now he says he's going back home to the Iron Islands.
Because being killed isn't punishment enough.
Right.
So, I mean, what does that mean? Like, he assumes that his father is still alive because his father had lived until this episode. I mean, would his father torture him? Like, his father probably doesn't care about him. I mean, his genitals are cut off.
Does he think he's going to... I mean, he can't think he's... I don't, it's interesting because Theon is talking about making amends and how he's trying to redeem himself, right? So what does redemption look like to him?
I thought it was saving Sansa.
I thought so too, but now that Sansa's with Brienne and Pod, Sansa's clearly in better hands than with a guy who's been mutilated, and Sansa's clearly a better fighter, and maybe he can do more good back at the Iron Islands.
Helping his sister, maybe?
Maybe. So he goes back, we end that scene with his intention of going back to the Iron Islands. We go to the Iron Islands and we see Balon talking to
Yara.
Yara, right? It was Asha.
But Yara in the show for some reason.
Because there was Osha.
Osha, yeah.
Right.
Who I would like to see again. Come on, show writers.
Right. So we see them arguing about
what to do,
right?
And Yara's totally right, 100% right. Maintaining those forts, I'm not saying that they shouldn't try to conquer land, theoretically, even at least temporarily. Right. Not those places. That is a waste of men.
Yeah, but
it makes you look weak.
I mean, that's Balon acting out, right? Like, Balon is still smarting from when he got put down earlier, decades ago, and now he's taking his petty revenge. I mean, not petty.
Balon's a relic.
Right.
Like, his mind is not in what's happening now.
Right. He's got no idea. He's got no clue. And which also shows us what happens when he walks out on that catwalk. Now, we don't know that from the way the book goes, because the way the book talks is like, oh, there was just a storm.
And he was thrown off.
Like,
yeah. But now you have to wonder, is this what happened anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, because that guy does show up the next day. They don't actually even name him in this episode. We just know that he's a brother of Balon.
Right, but not Damp Hair.
Who I think is the guy in the next scene, but they also don't name him.
Right.
Maybe they don't want to overwhelm you too much.
Yeah, maybe not. Right, so Balon had a couple of brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Dampera's cousin? We should look this up.
I don't know if it's his brother. It might be. Far more frail than I would have expected. I pictured him being this hulking
guy. Right,
because
they write about him being a lot bigger.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was like Gandalf the White's younger brother. And there's another brother out there that we haven't seen. Will we see him eventually?
Right. And they mentioned that there's going to be a Kingsmoot, which is everybody getting together, and they will get into this. But in the book, that's when all of the Ironborn get together and pick who they're going to follow as their new king.
It's a cool tradition.
When there's a problem with the line of succession.
Yeah. It's an odd form of limited democracy in a world that has very little of it.
Of all people, the Viking types,
of all people, yeah. And they gloss over it really quickly. I assume they'll probably keep that to an episode or two. I don't think that they'll spend too much time on that.
Right.
And it's odd that that we're finally going to have this. This was far earlier in the books.
Right.
And I wonder, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I wonder how much we'll get to in this season of that storyline, because a lot has happened since then.
Right.
Not that you could even theoretically predict based on what you've seen in the show, of course.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes, but the most important, so this is the stuff we've been dying to see, is the scenes back in Winterfell.
Back in Castle Black.
I'm sorry, back in Castle
can I make one prediction? Sorry.
Sure.
I wonder, so you said what would be redemption for him. I don't know that this would be redemption. I don't know that we've even seen it in the show, but culturally, the people from the Iron Islands have this thing of drowning their people, it's like a baptism by drowning, and then you come back reborn.
Right.
Could that be his form of redemption? He comes back as a religious, follower of the drowned god?
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, he's going back there for a reason. There's got to be something there for him. Okay, so
all right,
most important scene.
Go back to Castle Black.
Yes.
Right, and we see Davos come in to talk to Melisandre, and she's having a crisis of faith.
She's a sad sack.
She's given up. She's given up. It's all done. And he's, and she says, everything I've seen in the flames, it's all gone. Jon Snow is dead. And Davos asked the question everybody's been waiting to hear, which is, does he have to be? Right? And she says that she's never done this before. She doesn't think she has that power. She's heard about it done. And he has to really kind of twist her arm. Or not twist her arm, but really beg her to do it, right? Because she says, I don't know. I feel like my God's abandoned me. I'm having, she doesn't believe anymore.
Yeah.
And I love that Davos is look, fuck the gods, fuck the Seven, fuck the drowned god, fuck the Lord of Light. Just try it.
Yeah.
Just please try it.
Yeah, I like the fuck the gods. I'm not a devout man, obviously.
Obviously.
I like that.
Right.
And it's, so it's interesting that he has to be the one to get her to try it. So she's not sure that she can do it. She's not sure.
And has to remind her, look, here's the crazy shit that I've seen you do.
Yes.
You've done
power. Amazing things.
Why is this stopping you?
Well, and also, look, she did those leeches back in the day to kill the false kings. Well, we had Stannis possibly killed. There was no reference to him in this episode, so that's a false king killed. And now Balon. Right. All of them have died.
Right.
So that's another sign of her power. But so she doesn't think that she can do it. She doesn't know that she should do it. She thought that Jon was important, but then he died, so she questions that. And she also cautions him that the one experience she had of seeing a man who had been brought back was, again, she said something to the effect of, but he shouldn't have been, or something like that. Like it was bad.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that are weighing down on her as she decides to do it.
And we get a little bit of this out of, the book, the novels go into this much deeper, but we see a little bit of this from Beric Dondarrion, that he talks about how it, after coming back so many times, it lessens
9 times, I think.
Right. You sound like
crazy.
Right. You sound like Principal Rooney. 9 times.
I was thinking of the Catwoman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it'll be Dondarrion comes back and he's lessened, right? He's not the man he used to be.
Yeah.
And so we go into this scene with those warnings, and you see her. So there's Jon Snow lying out. She cleans off the blood. She wipes him down. She starts cutting his hair and dropping that into the fire, and she's praying, and nothing happens. You know, and she gives that first prayer, and she with her hands on him, and she prays, and nothing happens. And she
But she looked like something happened.
Right. And then she picks her hands up, and she puts her hands back down again, and says the prayer again, right? Says the invocation again. but she doesn't look confused. She doesn't look angry. She looks resigned.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
okay,
it's a
I'll
great.
do this.
But also like, I knew this wasn't going to work, but I'll try it again. But I knew it was going to work, and she keeps trying it, and it keeps not working.
Yeah.
Right. And she goes 3 or 4 times, and then we see, what's his name with the beard, the wildling.
Yeah.
Like,
it's been a while. I'm supposed to be the name guy.
Right. He.
No.
Like they're all
the bear fucker. Yeah.
Right. Thorin Oakenshield. Not Thorin.
What was I thinking? Thorin. Yeah. Great.
We see them all. Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit. That's not.
Yeah. That's in.
We know who we're talking about. Another dude with a beard.
Yeah.
We see, and the way it's all staged in these long takes, and they're all just kind of looking, and the one guy, like the wildling, he's like, "Fuck it, I'm out," and he leaves, and they all stand there watching. And Melisandre leaves, like she just gives up, and she walks with her.
She feels her age.
Right, she feels her age. Her shoulders are slumped, and Davos just keeps looking, and almost like it's not that he's in denial, but it's like he's pleading, like he's just like, please come back, and he finally, like he's the last one out. Finally, he's like, and he leaves, and nobody's there, and you wait, and nothing's there, and it's in that moment I'm thinking. They're going to leave him dead.
Like maybe we've been wrong.
Maybe we've been wrong all along. And I thought, God, we're going to watch this dead body and it's going to cut to the credits.
Yeah.
And then you get,
yeah. Ghost feels it first.
Right. The minute you see Ghost kind of picks his ears up and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Finally.
I thought there was some chance that they might have him come back, but not until next episode. That would have been annoying.
Right.
It would also be very Game of Thrones for that gasp to be all he gets.
Right.
He's back dead again. But I like that they waited as long as they
hilarious.
did.
Like, and then bleed all over again. Oh, I'm still dead.
Yeah. You didn't cure the wounds, you fools. I'm still
Sew
wounded.
me up.
Yeah. So, look, we got what we expected. He had to come back. The Kit Harington has already apologized for lying to everybody.
Well, let's talk about that, though, because, this has been a thing that we have seen around this show, and it happens in the press, right? We live in an age, not to go completely off tangent, but we live in an age where everybody is covering everything from a journalistic standpoint. And
castings
and everything. And we have no choice but to put, these actors, these cast members, these production people. I remember when Michael Bay swore up and down before the first Transformers movies that no, Optimus Prime does not have lips. Relax, everybody. And sure enough, Optimus Prime has lips in his version. I don't even remember that.
And it's so hard to see anything on those robots.
So here's the thing, everybody. For all the people that have said, oh, Jon Snow's coming back, Kit Harington has said, no, he's not coming back. We ourselves, we only have ourselves as a society to blame that we make these actors have to lie to us.
Yeah. And I'm glad they do. I'm glad they do.
And I'm glad that they do, right? Because, look, like, again, we're putting them in this position. So that should be a lesson to all of us. That for everybody that says, oh, this person's done, right? Yeah. Right? What's her name? Who plays you're talking about
Catelyn Stark.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For everybody who's convinced Lady Stoneheart is not coming back because the actress that plays Catelyn is gone.
Yeah.
Like, look,
it's
there's a lot of people who are clearly comfortable with lying to the press to keep the secrets of the show. And that's what we got here. And I think that's kind of the right move. I hate to say it. Like, because look, if Kit Harington says, oh yeah, I'll be back.
Then that ruins it, yeah.
Right, ruins the whole, then it takes the drama away from the story.
Yeah,
right?
and even though we were fairly sure this is a very telegraphed thing, it wasn't impossible that it would be different.
No, and that's the thing about this show is like going into that scene, it's directed in such a way that like, oh shit, maybe this isn't going to work.
Maybe, yeah.
Right? That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
I know that we've gone over, there's one or two other points I want to make. One, we know it's great that he's back, but we have to see how he's different. George R. R. Martin in the past has given interviews saying that if you're going to bring a character back, they have to be changed.
Right.
There has to be cost.
His hair will be shorter because it all got cut off. His hair will be
shorter. So that's going to be interesting to see.
He'll be allergic to dogs.
Exactly. Now he hates Ghost. A few things I would have tweaked. It's a little bit odd that Davos brings up the idea. Davos doesn't like the magic. I would have preferred that Melisandre came up with it. Also, Davos's commitment to bringing back Jon Snow. Not entirely sure why he cares so much. Look, Davos does appreciate the threat north of the wall, so maybe that's enough. And the way that they stage the scene, I predicted that they would do the resurrection while they're trying to break down the door. That is a lot more exciting than they're going to break down the door, they get stopped, and then, oh, cool, now we have all the time we want.
I hear what you're saying, but I think that if you look at Davos being the one to go to the money letters at Braavos and say, look, there is a problem over the wall, and you need to give this guy the money, and he's the one who convinces Stannis, like, we got to go north. We got to go north.
So this is consistent.
So this is consistent. Like, Davos is maybe the one guy south of the wall who really understands the abject terror that's waiting on the other side of the wall.
Yeah, other than the Night's Watch.
Right. But, I mean, outside of the Night's Watch, Davos is the one guy. I mean, look, Davos should be king. Davos Seaworth is the one guy's like, oh, God.
I love Davos.
Right.
Every scene, I love that guy.
And so I think it's consistent with him talking Melisandre into this, who also has, understandably, like, it's a beautiful scene that she's lost her faith. And a beautiful scene that he has to, I mean, look how the tables have turned. Yeah. Right? And I think that's a great update for those characters. And
she's going to get her faith back in a big way next episode.
Or maybe not.
You don't think so?
I don't know. Like, is she going to be as...
I think she's going to be... Well, she's going to be his priestess, I guess.
But is she going to be as forthright as she had been previously, right? Like, she had a lot of attitude before.
Yeah, maybe not.
And she's been humbled, right? Because now she's realized she's misinterpreted a lot of things.
She's fallible.
And she's fallible, and I think that maybe makes her stronger, but in a way that she needs to be stronger and not just being arrogant about it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, that's it. It's big episode, lots of stuff to cover. We did go long, but we will be back next week with more Game of Thrones. God only knows what craziness is going to happen next season or next episode.
Next episode.